The Orchid room was meant for beauty and silence, but whispers of a millionaire's ghost turned it into the center of a chilling mystery. Welcome to the Silent Clueworks. I am your host, Echo of Silence. Comment where you're listening from. Your presence makes these stories come alive. Let's enter the mystery. If you keep house the way Nero Wolfe kept house, you don't merely live in it, you defend it. The brownstone on West 35th wasn't an address, it was a principality. With one sovereign, one executive officer, one cook who could have qualified as a fourth branch of government, and one orchid room that was as private as a man's conscience. So when the doorbell rang at 11 minutes past 10 on a Tuesday morning, an hour when no decent stranger should be arriving without an appointment, I took it personally. I was at my desk in the office, pretending to reconcile a stack of invoices with Fritz's cheerful fiction about what butter costs these days. Wolfe was behind me, in the red leather chair, where he spent most of his waking life with the air of a man waiting for the world to apologize for existing. The bell rang again, longer this time. Wolfe's eyes moved, not his head. "Archie," he said, "if that is Inspector Kramer, tell him I am engaged." "If it's Kramer, he'll tell me you're engaged," I said, standing up. "Then he'll come in anyway, and you'll look offended and feel gratified. It's a ritual." His lips compressed. "Go." I went. On the stoop stood a woman in a camel hair coat that had seen better winters, and a man in a suit that hadn't. The man was the one who rang the bell, the woman was the one who expected the bell to obey. She was in her late 40s, tight-lipped, carefully made up, and carrying a leather portfolio as if it were a shield. The man had a narrow face and the kind of anxious politeness you see in bank clerks and hired drivers. "Mr. Goodwin?" the woman asked. "That's me. Provided you're not selling religion or vacuum cleaners." Her mouth twitched, as if she had once owned a sense of humor and had sold it for tax reasons. "My name is Lenore Voss. I need to see Nero Wolfe." "You and half the city," I said. "You're early. I was told he values punctuality. He values orchids more, but we humor the rest of us. Do you have an appointment?" "No. But I have information that concerns your orchid room." That did it. My eyebrows went up on their own. The orchid room was Wolfe's cathedral, and most people didn't even know it existed unless they'd read about it or tried to sue Wolfe for emotional damages. I studied her again. She was too controlled for a crank, too direct for a social climber. The man beside her shifted his weight, looking at the street as if expecting someone to leap from a mailbox. "I'll see what I can do," I told her, and led them inside. In the office, Wolfe didn't rise. He didn't even offer the courtesy of turning his chair. He merely looked at them as if they were facts he hadn't requested. "Mr. Wolfe," I said, "this is Lenore Voss. She says she has information that concerns the orchid room." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. He moved only enough to set his fingertips together. "Indeed. Miss Voss, you have 10 seconds to justify your intrusion." The woman opened her portfolio with measured fingers and produced a photograph, glossy, professional, the kind that comes from a framed portrait. She set it on my desk. I glanced at it and felt a small inward click, the way a lock sounds when you didn't know it had been engaged. The man in the photograph was handsome in the polished way of men who pay to be handsome. Silver at the temples, confident eyes, smile built for charity dinners. I knew the face because New York knew it. "Lysander Rook," I said. Wolfe's nostrils flared. "A vulgar titan. I have declined to meet him." "Then you'll be pleased to know he's dead," I told him. Lenore Voss spoke for the first time without rehearsed steel. "He died 9 months ago." Officially, a heart attack in Palm Beach. Wolfe's eyelids lowered a fraction. "And unofficially, he is not dead," she said, At least he is not absent. That was a nice trick, making nonsense sound like a legal clause. Wolf didn't blink. You are proposing spiritualism, he said, contemptuous. No. She shook her head once. I'm proposing theft. Blackmail. And, she hesitated, and for the first time the control slipped, showing something raw. A humiliation that reaches into your house. That got my full attention. Wolf's house didn't get humiliated. It got violated, and Wolf responded to violation the way a cobra responds to a boot. How, Wolf asked softly, does Lysander Rook's posthumous persistence concern my orchids? Lenore Vass took a breath. Because someone has been in your orchid room. I waited for Wolf to explode. He didn't. He only stared, still as stone. That is impossible, he said. It happened, she replied. Last Thursday, between 4 and 6 in the afternoon, I swallowed. Between 4 and 6 was when Wolf was upstairs with Theodore Horstman and the orchids, and no one, not even me, was supposed to intrude unless the house was on fire and we had the courtesy to notify him first. Wolf's voice was suddenly precise enough to cut glass. On what authority do you make this assertion? Lenore Vass slid another item from the portfolio, a small envelope, plain, unmarked. She placed it beside the photograph. This was delivered to me yesterday, she said. No return address. Inside was a single object. I opened it, because I'm the one who handles envelopes in this establishment. Inside was a dried, pale fragment, delicate, curved, like a piece of tissue paper. I knew orchids about as well as a man knows his enemy by studying them from a safe distance. But even I recognized it. An orchid petal. Wolf's eyes fixed on it. His face didn't change, but the air did. The room tightened. Lenore Vass spoke again, quieter now. Along with that petal was a note. It said, "Tell Wolfer the millionaire's ghost has been in his orchid room. He will pay, or he will be visited again." For a long moment, Wolfer said nothing. Then he lifted his gaze to her, and the famous lethargy was gone. In its place was something colder, like a mind closing its doors. "Miss Vass," he said, "you have made a grievous statement. If it is true, it is intolerable. If it is false, it is unforgivable." She met his eyes without flinching. "It's true." Wolf's fingers steepled again, but now they looked like a trap being set. "Archie," he said, "ring Mr. Panzer." That was the moment I knew the day's invoices were going to remain fiction. Saul Panzer does not materialize instantly, but he gives that impression because when Wolf calls, Saul rearranges the universe. I reached for the phone while Wolf kept his eyes on Lenore Vass as if she were a specimen under glass. Saul answered on the second ring. I told him Wolfe wanted him immediately, and that the matter involved an alleged intrusion into the orchid room. There was a pause on the line, Saul's version of a whistle, then he said he'd be there in 20 minutes. When I hung up, Wolf addressed Miss Vass again. "You will begin at the beginning. Concisely. You will omit nothing and embellish less," she inclined her head. The nervous man beside her finally spoke. "I'm Daniel Corda. I was Mr. Rook's personal secretary." "Condolences," I murmured. He ignored me. Miss Vass was Mr. Rook's financial controller for 11 years. After his death, she continued managing certain trusts. Wolf's gaze shifted to her. "You are implying that Mr. Rook's affairs are not settled." "They are settled on paper," she replied. "In practice, someone has been moving funds." "How much?" Wolf asked. $3 million over 6 months. I let out a low whistle of my own. For some men that would be retirement. For Lysander Rook it was probably lunch money, but dead men aren't supposed to transfer anything. "From where to where?" Wolf's tone was almost bored, which meant he was interested. "From a discretionary account in the Rook Foundation to a private holding company registered last year. The signature authorizing the transfers is Rook's." Wolf's eyes closed briefly. Forged. That was my assumption, she said. Until I received the first note. Plural, I said. You said this petal came with a note. There were others? She hesitated, then nodded. 3 in total. The first arrived 2 months ago. It contained a copy of a cancelled check bearing Mr. Rook's signature and the words, "The dead are not gone." I dismissed it as a cruel joke. And the second? Wolf asked. A week later, it referenced a conversation only 3 people could have known, Mr. Rook, Mr. Corder, and myself. Corder's face tightened. It quoted him verbatim. Wolf opened his eyes again. You suspect Mr. Rook is alive? I suspect someone wants us to believe he is, she said evenly, and that someone has access to information that should have died with him. I leaned against my desk. All right. That explains the ghost. It doesn't explain why our greenhouse gets cameo billing. Lenore Vass looked at me directly. The third note arrived yesterday morning. It stated that the next demonstration would prove the ghost's reach. Yesterday afternoon, I received the envelope with the orchid petal. Wolf's voice was silk over steel. You are certain it came from my collection? I had it examined, she said. A botanist at Columbia identified it as a Paphiopedilum rothschildianum, a rare specimen cultivated by only a handful of collectors in the city. One of them is you. Wolf made a small sound that might have been pain. My rothschildianums are numbered. I knew they were. Theodore kept records that would have impressed the Pentagon. You will remain here, Wolf said. Archie. That meant upstairs. I went without argument. The orchid room was warm, humid, and immaculate. Theodore Horstman was misting a row of cymbidiums with the reverence of a priest anointing relics. He turned, startled. Archie. Mr. Wolf is not due for another hour. He's revising his schedule, I said. We may have a problem, I explained briefly. Theodore's face went pale beneath the greenhouse glow. That is impossible, he whispered. No one entered. Between 4 and 6 last Thursday, I said. Think, he frowned, searching his memory. Mr. Wolfer was present from 2 until 4:30. At 4:30 he returned downstairs. I remained until 6. No one came. No deliveries, no maintenance, none. His voice was firm now. I locked the outer door. The key never leaves my person. I moved along the benches until I reached the Rothschildianums. I counted automatically, though I didn't know their individual quirks the way Theodore did. How many? I asked. 4, he said. Always 4. I bent closer. One blossom looked slightly asymmetrical, but that could have been my imagination. Theodore saw where I was looking and stiffened. That bloom was intact yesterday, he said sharply. I would have noticed. Notice now, I said. He leaned in, examining it from 3 angles. His fingers hovered but did not touch. A petal is missing, he said finally, his voice breaking. 1 lateral segment. Cleanly removed, I felt a slow chill. So someone was here. Theodore shook his head violently. No. No one could have been. I would have. Unless, I said, it happened while you were downstairs. I was not downstairs, he insisted. Not between 4:30 and 6. And before 4:30 Wolf was here, I said. Which means if the petal was taken Thursday between 4 and 6, it was taken either while Wolf was present or after he left, and before you noticed. Theodore's distress was genuine. He loved those plants more than most people love their children. I went back down. Wolf looked up as I entered. Report. A petal is missing, I said, from a Rothschildianum. Clean cut. Theodore swears no one entered. Wolf closed his eyes again, longer this time. Swears? He'd stake his soul, I said. And he doesn't gamble. Lenore Vass's composure faltered. Then it's true. Something occurred, Wolf corrected. That is not equivalent to your spectral hypothesis. He turned to me. Archie, on Thursday between 4 and 6, where were you? Out, I said. Interviewing a publisher about a missing manuscript. I returned at 6:20. And Fritz? In the kitchen, ruling his domain, Wolf's gaze sharpened. You will ascertain precisely who entered and exited this house on Thursday. Every delivery, every caller, every tradesman. That's a short list, I said. We don't run a train station. Nevertheless, he said, the sanctity of my orchid room has been challenged. I will not tolerate theatrics. There was a knock at the front door, brisk and efficient. That will be Sol, I said. Wolf nodded once. Good. Miss Voss, Mr. Corder, you will remain. If a ghost exists, we shall discover who is wearing the sheet. Sol Panzer came in with the weather still clinging to his coat, and the look of a man who had been told the cathedral roof was leaking. He nodded to me, gave Wolf a glance that took in the room, the clients, and the tension, and waited. Wolf made the introductions with economical distaste. Sol listened without interruption while Lenore Voss repeated the essentials, the diverted funds, the notes, the petal. He asked only one question. Palm Beach, he said to her. Who identified the body? A private physician retained by the family, she answered, and a county coroner. The body was cremated within 48 hours. Family? Sol asked. None immediate. A cousin in Connecticut. No spouse. No children. Sol's eyes shifted briefly to Corder. And you were present? At the hospital, Corder said. I saw him. He swallowed. He was dead. Sol nodded once, as if filing the statement under useful but incomplete. Wolf addressed him. Between 4 and 6 last Thursday, someone removed a petal from a Paphiopedilum Rothschildianum in my orchid room. No forced entry. No witness. I require the impossible explained. Sol's mouth twitched faintly. I'll start with the possible. Wolf inclined his head. You will begin with the house. Archie will assist. Then you will proceed to the financial matter. Sol turned to me. Front door log? We don't keep one, I said. But I do remember faces. Thursday we had a laundry delivery at 10, the fishmonger at 11:30, and a messenger around 2. Name? Kid in a cap. From a legal firm. Dropped papers for Wolf, left. I signed. And after 2? Sol asked. Quiet. Wolf upstairs at 2, down at 4:30. I left at 3 for that publisher. Fritz was in the kitchen all afternoon. Theodore in the plant room. Sol nodded. Anyone with keys besides you, Wolfer, Fritz, and Theodore? No, I said automatically. Then I hesitated. Except the cleaning service on Mondays. But Thursday wasn't Monday. Sol's gaze sharpened. Locks changed recently? Not in the last year. Wolf's voice cut in. Theodore asserts no one entered the orchid room. Sol shrugged slightly. Then someone was already inside. The words landed with a quiet weight. Lenore Voss stiffened. That's absurd, she said. You can't mean someone hid in the room for hours. Greenhouses are warm, Sol said, and humid. Uncomfortable but survivable. I pictured the narrow space behind the taller specimens, the shadows between benches. It wasn't spacious, but a determined man could tuck himself away. Archie, Wolfie said, you will examine the orchid room thoroughly. Every corner. Every container. If someone concealed himself there, he left evidence. On it, I said. Sol continued. Meanwhile, I'll look into Rook's cremation. If there's a ghost, I want to know who signed the death certificate. Lenore Voss leaned forward. You think he could be alive? Sol didn't answer her directly. I think $3 million is motive enough for most men. Wolf's eyes rested on her. Miss Vass, who inherits if the foundation collapses? It won't collapse, she said quickly. The principle is secure. That was not my question. She hesitated. If it were dissolved, residual assets would revert to the Rook estate, and the estate? Wolf pressed. Would be administered by Mr. Corder until transferred to the designated beneficiaries. Corder looked startled. Lenore, it's in the documents, she said sharply. Saul's gaze flicked between them. And the beneficiaries? Several cultural institutions, she replied. Museums. A conservatory. Names, Wolf said. She listed 4, including the Metropolitan Museum and a private botanical institute in Westchester. Wolf's eyes narrowed slightly at the last. A botanical institute, yes, she said. Rook had a fascination with rare plants. Did he? Wolf murmured. I went upstairs again, this time with Saul at my heels. Theodore looked as if he hadn't moved since I left. When he saw Saul, he drew himself up, affronted dignity battling anxiety. Saul began without ceremony, inspecting the door, the lock, the hinges. He crouched to examine the threshold, ran a finger along the inside frame, checked the windows. I watched Theodore watch him. No sign of forced entry, Saul said. Window latches intact. He moved between the benches with careful steps, scanning the floor. The tile was clean enough to eat off, courtesy of Theodore's standards. Thursday, Saul said without looking up. Did you leave this room for any reason after Wolfer went downstairs? No, Theodore said firmly. I remained. I repotted a cymbidium at 5. I watered the phalaenopsis at 5:30. I would have seen anyone. Unless you were distracted, Saul said. Theodore bristled. I am not inattentive. Saul paused beside the Rothschildianum with the missing petal. He leaned close, studying the cut edge. Sharp instrument, he said. Clean slice. He straightened and looked at Theodore. Do you keep pruning tools? Yes, Theodore said, and pointed to a small cabinet against the wall. Saul opened it. Inside were shears, knives, twine, everything a man might need to shape botanical perfection. He examined the shears, then one of the narrow-bladed knives. Count them, he said. Theodore blinked. Count them? Knives, Saul said. Theodore complied, lips moving silently. 3. As always, Saul handed one to me. Smell it. I did. It smelled faintly metallic, with a trace of something sweet and green. Recently cleaned, Saul said. All of them? Theodore flushed. I clean my tools after every use. Saul nodded slowly. Of course, he moved toward the far corner where taller orchids cast denser shadows. He crouched, then reached behind a bench. What is it? I asked. He withdrew his hand holding a small object. It was a matchbook, damp at the edges. I took it. The cover was embossed in gold, the Rook Club, Palm Beach. Theodore stared. I have never seen that. Saul's eyes met mine. Someone from Palm Beach, he said quietly, has been in this room. We went downstairs with the matchbook wrapped in my handkerchief, as if it might decide to evaporate out of embarrassment. Lenore Voss and Daniel Corder were exactly where we had left them, as though movement might count against them. Saul placed the matchbook on Wolf's desk without flourish. Found behind a bench in the Orchid room, he said. Rook Club. Palm Beach. Lenore Voss's composure cracked visibly. That's impossible. Corder went pale. The Rook Club was his. Private. Members by invitation only. Wolf did not touch the matchbook. He regarded it as one might regard a confession waiting to be extracted. Mr. Corder, he said, how many members? 43, Corder replied automatically. Hand-picked. Business associates, a few politicians, 2 collectors. Collectors, Wolf repeated. Art, Corder said quickly. Not plants. Wolf's gaze shifted to Miss Voss. You did not mention that Mr. Rook maintained a private club. It was separate, she said. A vanity project. Vanity projects are seldom separate, Wolf murmured. They are extensions of ego, Saul spoke. If someone from Palm Beach came to New York, entered this house and removed a petal, he either has extraordinary access or extraordinary nerve. Or assistance, I added. Wolf's eyes flicked toward me briefly, approving the direction if not the tone. Miss Vass, he said, who among the club's members had knowledge of Mr. Rook's financial structures? Very few, she said. Business was compartmentalized. Names, Wolf said. She hesitated only a second this time. Alistair Breen, Victor Lathrop, Geraldine Mott, and her gaze slid almost involuntarily to Corda. Daniel, Corda stiffened. That's absurd. Is it? Wolf asked mildly. Corda flushed. I managed correspondence. I did not control accounts. But you knew of them, Wolf said. Yes, he snapped. Because it was my job. Saul leaned against the wall, watching the exchange like a man watching two chess pieces consider collision. Miss Vass, he said, which of those names is currently in New York? Breen, she said after a moment. He relocated his firm here last year. Lathrop travels constantly. Geraldine Mott lives in Connecticut. And you? Saul asked Corda. I moved back to New York after Mr. Rook's death. Wolf's fingers steepled again. Mr. Corda, you saw the body? Yes. Describe it, Corda blinked. Describe the body, Wolf repeated. Specifically, Corda swallowed. He was in a hospital bed. Oxygen mask. The doctors said cardiac arrest. His face was pale. Any distinguishing marks? Wolf asked. A scar on his left wrist, Corda said without hesitation. From a sailing accident years ago, Lenore Vass's head turned sharply. I didn't know about a scar. Corda looked at her, startled. You never saw it? No, she said quietly. Wolf's eyes sharpened. Miss Vass, how long did you work with Mr. Rook? 11 years. And you never observed a scar on his wrist? She hesitated. We were not intimate. Proximity suffices for observation, Wolf said. The air in the room tightened another notch. Saul pushed off the wall. I'll verify the cremation records and the hospital staff. If someone impersonated a corpse, it would require cooperation, or bribery, I said. Which is cooperation with incentive, Saul replied. Wolf nodded. Do so. Saul left without further ceremony. Silence lingered for a moment after the door closed. Wolf shifted his attention back to the matchbook. Archie, he said, contact this Alistair Breen. Request his presence here tomorrow at 11. As what? I asked. A social call? As a courtesy extended before suspicion becomes accusation, I nodded and reached for the phone. While I dialed, Wolf addressed Miss Vass again. You have received 3 notes. Where are the first 2? In my portfolio, she said. She removed them carefully and handed them over. I finished arranging the appointment with Breen. He sounded wary, but curious, and joined Wolf at the desk. The first note was typed, clean and impersonal. The dead are not gone. Attached was a photocopy of a check bearing Rook's signature. The second was handwritten in a bold, slanted script. You always underestimated the value of silence, Lenore. Beneath it, a precise quotation from a board meeting, something trivial about tax exposure. The third, the one with the petal, was typed again. Tell Wolf the millionaire's ghost has been in his Orchid room. He will pay, or he will be visited again. Wolf examined them with care, as though the paper itself might confess. Different instruments, he murmured. Typewriter for the first and third, pen for the second. Deliberate variation, I said. Yes, he agreed, to suggest multiple authors. Or instability. Lenore Vass watched him intently. What does it suggest to you? That the author wishes to be perceived as theatrical, Wolf said. The invocation of a ghost, the intrusion into my domain, these are not efficient methods of extortion. They are dramatic. Corda spoke tightly. You believe this is extortion? $3 million have been diverted, Wolf said. You have received threats. Yes. And the demand? She asked. Wolf looked at her steadily. There is none yet. That is the most interesting element, she frowned. Interesting? An extortionist who does not name his price is not yet ready to collect, Wolf said. He is arranging the stage. A faint tremor passed through her hands. For what? For leverage, Wolf replied. He wishes you unsettled, doubtful, perhaps divided. His gaze flicked again to Corda. The implication hung there, heavy and unspoken. I broke it. If someone from Palm Beach came here, he didn't float in on a breeze. He took a plane or a train. Saul can check passenger lists. Indeed, Wolf said. But we must not neglect the nearer possibility. You think someone here let him in, I said. I think, Wolf replied, that a man who removes a petal from my orchid does not do so blindly. He knew precisely what it would signify. To you, Lenore Vass said softly. Wolf inclined his head. Yes, and why would he care about that? She asked. Wolf's eyes rested on her with sudden intensity. Because, he said, the ghost is not merely haunting you, Miss Voss. He is courting me. If there's one thing I've learned in Wolf's employ, it's that when he says someone is courting him, he doesn't mean flowers and dinner. He means challenge. And challenge, to Wolf, is an invitation he rarely declines. Lenore Vass absorbed his statement with a controlled inhale. Why would anyone want to involve you? Because my participation increases the spectacle, Wolf said. And perhaps the stakes. Corda shifted in his chair. You're suggesting this is entertainment? I am suggesting, Wolf replied, that the intrusion into my orchid room was unnecessary to extort you. Therefore it served another purpose. To provoke you, I said. Yes. Lenore Vass looked between us. But why would that benefit anyone? Unless, she stopped. Unless, Wolf prompted. Unless someone wanted your attention focused here, she finished. On your house, not on the foundation. Wolf's eyes narrowed fractionally, an attempt to divide my scrutiny. Or to implicate you, Corta said suddenly. We all looked at him. Implicate Wolf? I asked. In the theft, Corta said, color rising in his face. If word spread that money vanished and then evidence appeared linking the scheme to Mr. Wolf, Wolf made a dismissive sound. My reputation does not rest upon orchid petals. No, Corda said quickly, but scandal spreads faster than truth. Enough, Wolf said. Speculation without structure is noise. He turned to me. Archie, you will visit Alistair Breen this afternoon. Home or office? I asked. Office, Wolf said. A man is less guarded among his ledgers than his furniture. I nodded. Miss Vass, Wolfe continued, you will provide Archie with the addresses of the other club members. I want a list of those who have traveled to New York in the past month. I can obtain that, she said. And you, he said to Corda, will remain available. You will not leave the city without informing me. Corda bristled. I'm not a suspect. You are adjacent to motive, Wolfe said calmly. That suffices. The interview concluded with minimal ceremony. I escorted them out, noting that Lenore Vass walked with the rigid posture of someone who refuses to look back. Corda lingered a second longer, as if wanting to say something, then thought better of it. When I returned to the office, Wolfe had not moved. Thoughts? I asked. Several, he said. None yet conclusive. You think Rook could be alive? Wolf's eyelids lowered. I think men with sufficient ego and resources have staged more elaborate disappearances for lesser rewards. And 3 million is only the opening act, I said. Precisely. I grabbed my hat and headed out. Alistair Breen's firm occupied 3 floors of a polished building on Madison. The reception area was modern, efficient, and designed to imply competence at a premium rate. Breen himself was in his early 50s, trim, with silver hair and a tan that suggested either leisure or lighting. Mr. Goodwin, he said, rising to shake my hand. Mr. Wolf mentioned a matter of mutual acquaintance. Lysander Rook, I said, watching his eyes. There was the briefest flicker, surprise, calculation, then composure. Tragic loss, Breen said smoothly. Is it? I asked. He gestured to a chair. What does that mean? It means, I said, sitting, that someone connected to Rook has been moving funds. His smile thinned. That would be impossible. The accounts are audited. Accounts can be persuaded, I said. So can auditors. His gaze sharpened. Are you accusing me of something, Mr. Goodwin? Not yet, I said cheerfully. Just asking whether you've been to Palm Beach lately, of course, he said. The club maintained operations there. When was your last visit? September. Last Thursday between 4 and 6, I said. Where were you? He leaned back. In this office, with 3 associates and a client from Boston. Names? He gave them without hesitation. I studied him. He was polished, controlled, and just slightly too precise. Did you ever visit Nero Wolfe's home? I asked. No, he said. Why would I? Curiosity, I said. He has excellent orchids. His eyes flickered again, almost imperceptibly. I'm not a botanist. But Rook was, I said lightly. Breen's jaw tightened. Rook was interested in many things. Such as staging drama? I asked. He stood. If you have something substantive, Mr. Goodwin, present it. Otherwise, I have work to do. I rose as well. We'll be in touch. Outside, I made a note to verify his alibi. Then I headed back to the brownstone. Wolfe listened to my report without interruption. His reaction to the orchid mention? He asked. A flicker, I said. Small, but there? Fear? Wolfe asked. Recognition, I said. Wolfe nodded slowly. And his alibi? To be checked, he closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. Archie, arrange for Miss Mott and Mr. Lathrop to attend here tomorrow afternoon. We will compress the timeline. All at once? I asked. Yes, he said. The ghost desires an audience. We shall provide one. And if he performs? I asked. Wolfe's gaze hardened. Then, he said, we shall remove the mask. By the following afternoon, the brownstone had the strained atmosphere of a theater 5 minutes before curtain. Wolfe detests disorder, and assembling suspects in his office qualifies as controlled disorder, but even he seemed to feel the shift in pressure. Alistair Breen arrived first, punctual and immaculate. He greeted Wolfe with a thin civility and took the red leather chair opposite my desk. His eyes moved once around the room, cataloguing exits, windows, leverage. Geraldine Mott arrived next. She was tall, composed, and dressed with understated precision. Her handshake was cool, her gaze was not. She had the look of a woman accustomed to negotiating without raising her voice. Victor Lathrop came last, late by 7 minutes and unapologetic. He was broader than the others, with a booming baritone and a tan that matched Breen's but seemed more sunburned than salon. He filled space automatically. Lenore Vass and Daniel Corda sat together on the yellow chairs against the wall. The seating arrangement had not been accidental. Wolfe surveyed them all from his throne. Thank you for coming, he said. We are gathered because Mr. Lysander Rook, though deceased, appears to be conducting business. A ripple moved through the room, small reactions, quickly suppressed. Breen smiled faintly. Surely that's a metaphor. We shall see, Wolfe said. He gestured to me. I produced the matchbook and set it on my desk where all could see the embossed gold letters. This was found in my orchid room, Wolfe said. A room to which none of you have been invited. Geraldine Mott's eyebrows lifted. Lathrop frowned. Breen's face remained carefully neutral. My orchids, Wolfe continued, are not public attractions. Yet a petal was removed from a rare specimen last Thursday between 4 and 6. That's absurd, Lathrop said. What does that have to do with us? Everything, Wolfe replied calmly, if the removal was intended as a message. Lenore Vass spoke, her voice steady. $3 million have been diverted from the foundation. Notes have been sent implying Mr. Rook's continued existence. Lathrop barked a short laugh. You think Lysander's haunting you? I think, she said tightly, that someone wants us to think so. Geraldine Mott folded her hands in her lap. And you believe one of us responsible? Wolf inclined his head. You were among the few with knowledge sufficient to manipulate the accounts. Breen leaned forward. This is outrageous. My firm audits dozens of funds. I do not micromanage transfers. Yet you knew of the discretionary account, Wolf said. Professionally, Breen replied. And you, Mr. Lathrop? Wolf asked. Your involvement? I invested alongside Lysander, Lathrop said. That's all. And Miss Mott? Wolf continued. Geraldine met his gaze evenly. I advised on acquisitions for the club's art collection. I had no access to financial controls. Wolf nodded once, as if ticking boxes in an invisible ledger. On Thursday between 4 and 6, he said. Where were you? Breen repeated the alibi he had given me. Geraldine stated she was at her Connecticut home, with her housekeeper as witness. Lathrop claimed to have been on a flight from Chicago, offering a boarding pass as proof. I made notes. The rhythm was familiar, statements, postures, small inflections. Wolf turned to Corder. You confirmed the scar on Mr. Rook's left wrist. Yes, Corder said, uneasily aware of the attention. Miss Vast did not know of it, Wolf said. That proves nothing, Corder snapped. Indeed, Wolf agreed. It proves proximity. The tension edged upward. Wolf shifted slightly in his chair. There is another matter. The notes sent to Miss Vast varied in format. 2 typed. 1 handwritten. He opened a folder and withdrew photocopies, which I distributed. Geraldine examined the handwriting with cool interest. Lathrop squinted. Breen's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly. Recognize it? Wolf asked. No, Breen said quickly. Geraldine shook her head. Lathrop grunted. Wolf's gaze rested on Breen a fraction longer than on the others. Mr. Breen, he said, your firm maintains archived correspondence for Mr. Rook? Of course. Typed on what machine? Wolf asked. Breen blinked. We transitioned to digital years ago. Before that? Wolf pressed. Standard office typewriters. Manual? Wolf asked. Yes, Wolf nodded, as though that detail had weight. Lathrop shifted in his seat. What exactly are you implying, Wolf? That someone familiar with Mr. Rook's habits is orchestrating this drama, Wolf said. Someone who understands both his finances and his vanity. Vanity? Geraldine echoed. The Rook Club, Wolf said softly. A monument to self. Breen's jaw tightened. We all benefited from that monument, did you? Wolf asked mildly. The question hung. At that moment the doorbell rang. Every head turned toward me. I rose, pulse quickening despite myself. The timing was too neat. In the hall, I opened the door to find a messenger in a neutral jacket holding a small parcel. For Nero Wolf, he said. Special delivery. I took it and shut the door. Back in the office, the air felt charged. Wolf regarded the parcel without touching it. Open it, Archie. I did. Inside was a small glass vial, stoppered tightly. Within it lay another orchid petal, fresh, pale, unmistakable, and beneath it a folded card. I read it aloud. The ghost attends your gathering. Ask them who among them has seen the scar. Silence dropped like a curtain. Geraldine's face had gone very still. Lathrop's eyes darted once toward Corder. Breen did not move at all. Wolfer's voice, when he spoke, was almost gentle. Indeed, he said. Let us ask. No one spoke. The little glass vial sat on my desk like a verdict waiting to be read. Wolfer let the silence mature. He had a talent for it. Most men rushed to fill quiet, but Wolfer cultivated it like one of his orchids. Mr. Corder, he said at last, you have stated that Mr. Rook bore a scar on his left wrist. You observed it at the hospital. Yes, Corder replied, his voice thin. And none of the rest of you have seen this scar? Wolf asked. his gaze sweeping the room. Geraldine Mott shook her head slowly. I never saw his wrists closely. Lathrop gave a snort. I wasn't in the habit of examining Lysander's anatomy. Breen remained motionless. I saw him many times, he said carefully, but I cannot recall a scar. Wolf inclined his head. Yet Mr. Corder recalls it vividly. I was at his bedside, Corder said sharply. Of course I noticed. Indeed, Wolf murmured. You were at his bedside. Lenore Voss looked at Corder, something dawning in her eyes. Daniel, she said quietly, when you described the scar yesterday, you were very certain. Because I saw it, he insisted. Wolf lifted a finger slightly, forestalling further exchange. The note invites us to ask who has seen the scar. It presumes knowledge within this room. He turned to me. Archie, when did you first hear of this scar? Yesterday, I said, from Corder. Miss Voss, you did not know of it in 11 years of professional association, Wolf said. No, she replied, her voice steadier now. Wolf nodded once. Mr. Corder, you stated that Mr. Rook was cremated within 48 hours. Yes, and you saw the body only once? Yes. Wolf's eyes narrowed slightly. Did you touch him? Corder blinked. What? Did you verify the scar by touch? Wolf asked. No, Corder said. I saw it through hospital lighting. From what distance? Wolf pressed. Corder hesitated. A few feet. And you are certain it was on the left wrist? Yes. Wolf leaned back, steepling his fingers. Curious, Lathrop shifted impatiently. What's curious? That the note asks who has seen the scar, Wolf said. It assumes the scar is significant. It is, Corder said defensively. It proves I was there. Or, Wolf said softly, it proves that someone wished to establish that you were there. The room tightened. Geraldine's eyes flicked toward Corder. Breen's expression did not change, but a pulse moved at his temple. Lenore Voss spoke carefully. Daniel arranged the hospital details. He insisted on handling them. Corder stared at her. You think I think, she said, and her voice did not tremble now, that you were closer to Lysander than I realized. Wolf raised a hand again. Emotion is premature. We will proceed with order. He gestured toward the vial. This petal is fresh. It was removed recently. Therefore, the intruder has either returned to my orchid room or has access to a similar specimen. The Botanical Institute, I said. Wolf nodded faintly. Yes, one of the beneficiaries of the estate. Geraldine spoke, her tone measured. You believe someone connected to the Institute could replicate this? It is possible, Wolf said. But the matchbook from the Rook Club suggests a more direct symbolism. Breen finally spoke again. This is absurd. You are building castles from petals. On the contrary, Wolf said, I am observing that the ghost's message was delivered during our assembly. Which means, what? Lathrop demanded. It means, Wolf replied, that someone present was aware of this meeting. A subtle shift went through the group. I informed all of you of the time yesterday, I said evenly. No one else. Except, Wolf added, Miss Voss and Mr. Corder. All eyes turned to them. Lenore Voss's face was pale, but composed. I told no one. Corder shook his head vigorously. Neither did I. Yet the parcel arrived precisely now, Wolf said. A theatrical flourish. Breen's gaze sharpened. Are you suggesting one of us arranged that delivery? I am suggesting, Wolf said calmly, that the sender knew when to strike. He shifted slightly, his bulk settling deeper into the chair. Mr. Corder, when you saw Mr. Rook's body, did you observe any other distinguishing feature? Corder swallowed. No. No ring? Wolf asked. No. Mr. Rook habitually wore a signet ring on his right hand, Wolf said. Miss Voss? Yes, she said. Gold. Engraved. It was not mentioned in the hospital report, Wolf continued, nor in the cremation inventory. Corder stared. I don't remember. Precisely, Wolf said. Silence again. Wolfie's voice remained level. If a man wished to stage his death, he would require a body resembling his own. He would also require a witness capable of identifying that body. Lathrop exhaled sharply. "You're saying Lysander is alive?" "I am saying," Wolf replied, "that the evidence of his death rests heavily upon Mr. Corder's identification." Corder's face had gone ashen. "That's insane, is it?" Wolf asked. $3 million have been diverted. Notes have been sent. My Orchid room has been violated. And now we are asked who has seen the scar. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze fixed on Corder. "Tell me, sir," Wolf said softly, "how did you know the scar was on the left wrist?" Corder opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Because I saw it," he said hoarsely. "I told you." Wolf did not blink. "On which wrist did Mr. Rook habitually wear his watch?" Corder hesitated a fraction too long. "His right." "No," Lenore Vass said automatically. "His left." "He was left-handed?" Wolf inclined his head slightly. "Indeed." Mr. Rook wore his watch on his left wrist, leaving the right unobstructed. Corder's breathing had grown shallow. "That doesn't. If Mr. Rook bore a scar on his left wrist," Wolf continued calmly, "it would have been partially obscured by the watch he habitually wore." "At the hospital, was he wearing it?" "No," Corder snapped. "Of course not." "Then the scar would have been plainly visible," Wolf said. "Unless, of course, it did not exist." A beat of silence. Geraldine Mott leaned forward. "Are you saying there was no scar?" "I am saying," Wolf replied, "that I have made inquiries since yesterday." All eyes turned to him. "I telephoned the Palm Beach Hospital this morning," he continued. "The attending nurse recalled no scar, nor did the physician who signed the death certificate." Corder stared at him, color draining. "You can't." "I can," Wolf said softly. "And I did." Lathrop let out a low whistle. Breen's composure cracked just enough for me to see satisfaction flicker and vanish. Lenore Vass's voice was barely above a whisper. "Daniel?" Corder's hands clenched. "They must have overlooked it." "Perhaps," Wolf said. "But you did not. You supplied the detail unprompted." He leaned back, eyes never leaving Corder. "The note asks who has seen the scar. It assumes the scar is fiction, and that only its inventor would claim familiarity." Corder shot to his feet. "This is ridiculous." "Sit down," Wolf said, and the authority in his tone was sufficient. After a moment, Corder did. Wolf's voice remained level. "Mr. Corder, you arranged the hospital identification. You insisted upon rapid cremation. You had access to the discretionary account, and you alone introduced the detail of the scar. You have no proof," Corder said through clenched teeth. Wolf's gaze sharpened. "On the contrary, the transfers from the Foundation were authorized using a signature identical to Mr. Rook's. Identical because it was genuine," a murmur went through the room. "Saul Panzer," Wolf continued, "has verified that Mr. Rook's death certificate was processed with unusual haste. The body was identified solely by you. The cousin in Connecticut declined to attend." Corder's lips trembled. "He trusted me." "Yes," Wolf said. "He did." Lenore Vass stared at Corder as though seeing him for the first time. "You helped him." Corder's composure fractured. "You don't understand." "Explain," Wolf invited. Corder's eyes darted to the others, then back to Wolf. The fight drained from his posture. "He was drowning," he said. "Not financially, reputationally. There were investigations pending, deals that would have collapsed the Foundation. He said a death would preserve everything and enrich you," Breen said coldly. Corder ignored him. He planned it for months. A body from a private clinic. Someone unclaimed. He altered records. The cremation eliminated questions. "And the scar?" Wolf asked quietly. "I invented it," Corder whispered. to make the identification more convincing. Lenore Voss closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the betrayal. "Rook is alive," Geraldine said flatly. "Yes," Corda said. "He's been in Europe." The transfers were to fund his new ventures. "And the notes?" I asked. Corda's jaw tightened. His idea, he wanted to see who would panic, who would turn on whom, and the Orchid room? Wolfie's voice was soft now, but dangerous. Corda swallowed. He knew you would take it personally. He said if you were involved, the others would feel the pressure. He had someone enter the house. A man from the club. He followed Theodore one afternoon, slipped in when the door was unsecured. Theodore, who had been hovering at the doorway unnoticed, made a strangled sound. Wolf's eyes flicked toward him briefly, then back to Corda. "The matchbook?" "A calling card," Corda said miserably. "A private joke. And today's delivery?" Wolf pressed. "I arranged it," Corda said. When Miss Voss told me about this meeting, silence settled heavily. Lathrop shook his head in disgust. Lysander always did love theatrics. Breen stood slowly. "You realize this will destroy him." "No," Wilfer said calmly. "His own vanity will accomplish that." Lenore Voss rose as well, her face composed now, almost serene. "The authorities will be informed." Corda did not protest. Wilfer inclined his head. "Archie will provide the necessary documentation." I nodded, already reaching for the phone. As the room began to disperse, Lathrop muttering, Geraldine silent, Breen grimly efficient, Corda remained seated, staring at his hands. "You admired him," Wolf said quietly. "Yes," Corda whispered. "He said death was just another transaction." Wolf's eyes hardened. "Death is not a transaction. It is a boundary." Corda let out a broken breath. When the last of them had gone and the house settled back into itself, Wolf closed his eyes. "My orchids," he said. "The damage is limited to 2 petals," I told him. "The rest survived the haunting." He grunted. Fritz appeared discreetly in the doorway. "Dinner, sir." Wolf opened his eyes and rose with effort. "Very well." As we moved toward the dining room, the brownstone felt restored, its equilibrium reasserted. "A ghost who faked his own death," I said. "You'd think that would require more imagination." Wolf paused at the threshold. "On the contrary, Archie," he said. "It requires only arrogance." I followed him in, thinking that if Lysander Rook had wanted immortality, he had achieved a less flattering version of it. Dinner that evening was roast duck with cherries, which under ordinary circumstances would have absorbed Wolf's full intellectual engagement. Instead, he ate with mechanical precision, his lips compressed in a line that meant digestion was secondary to contemplation. I waited until Fritz had withdrawn and the coffee was poured. "So," I said, "we have a living millionaire, a counterfeit corpse, and a secretary who thought immortality was a bookkeeping exercise. Case closed?" Wolf dabbed his mouth with his napkin. "Hardly." I raised an eyebrow. Corda confessed. "Saul will confirm Rook's whereabouts. The Foundation's funds can be traced." "Yes," Wolf said. "But we are confronted with a more delicate question." "Such as?" "Why," he said, "did Mr. Rook choose to reanimate himself now?" I leaned back. "Panic? Ego? Boredom?" "All insufficient," Wolf replied. "The transfers began 6 months ago. The notes 2 months ago. The intrusion into my Orchid room only last week." I considered that. "Escalation." "Precisely. Maybe the investigations he was dodging caught up," I suggested. Wolf shook his head. "Saul reports no active warrants. Suspicion, yes. Indictment, no." "Then he wanted something," I said. "Yes." The next morning, Saul arrived with a thin folder and the look of a man who had confirmed what he already suspected. "Rook is alive," he said without preamble. "Currently in Marseille under an assumed name. He traveled from Palm Beach to Lisbon, 3 days after his death. Private jet. Registered to a shell corporation tied to Corda. Wolf nodded once. The hospital staff were paid bonuses. Saul continued. The body used for identification was a John Doe from a clinic that handles indigent patients. Paperwork adjusted. And the foundation funds? I asked. Transferred to a holding company incorporated in Monaco, Saul said. Primary beneficiary, LR Holdings. Wolf's eyes narrowed slightly. Lysander Rook. Most likely, Saul agreed. I crossed to the window and looked out at 35th Street. So he fakes his death, siphons money, sends spooky notes, and pokes Wolf's orchids. All for what? Saul glanced at Wolf. Pressure. Wolf inclined his head. Miss Vass? I turned back. He wanted her unsettled. Yes, Wolf said. Miss Vass is the only individual with both knowledge of the Foundation's structure and sufficient integrity to resist manipulation. You think he expected her to crack? I asked. He expected her to seek counsel, Wolf said. And by involving me, he ensured that any response would be measured, not panicked. Saul frowned. Why involve you at all? Because, Wolf said, he required confirmation. Of what? I asked. That his deception was secure, Wolf replied. By testing the intellect most likely to detect it. I stared at him. He wanted you to try to prove he was alive. Yes. And when you couldn't, I said slowly, he would know the illusion was perfect. Wolf's eyes gleamed. Exactly. Saul let out a low breath. Except you did. Eventually Wolf corrected, but only because he indulged his vanity with the scar. I nodded. If he'd kept quiet, the Foundation might have limped along for years before anyone caught the discrepancies. Indeed, Wolf said. The ghost was impatient. There was a knock at the door. I answered it to find Lenore Vass, pale but composed. I wanted to thank you, she said as I ushered her in. Wolf acknowledged her with a slight inclination of his head. Corda has given a full statement, she said. The authorities are pursuing Rook through international channels. And the Foundation? Wolf asked. Stabilized, she replied. The board has appointed interim oversight. Wolf regarded her thoughtfully. You were loyal to Mr. Rook. Yes, she said simply. And yet he doubted you, Wolf said. A flicker of pain crossed her face. He doubted everyone. Because he doubted himself, Wolf said quietly. She drew a slow breath. He believed reinvention was power. It is, Wolf said, but only temporarily. She managed a faint smile. You've restored more than orchids, Mr. Wolf. I restored order, he said. Orchids are incidental. When she had gone, the brownstone felt once again like a sealed vessel, its boundaries intact. I looked at Wolf. You realize he'll try again. Men like Rook don't retire gracefully. Wolf settled back into his chair. Perhaps, but next time he will know that ghosts are unwelcome in this house, and that scars can be fatal, I said. Wolf's lips twitched, not quite a smile. Archie, he said, there is a lesson here. I was afraid of that. Arrogance, he said, is a more fragile disguise than death. I considered that as I returned to my desk. The city outside moved as it always did. Horns, footsteps, ambition humming along the pavement. Somewhere across the ocean, a millionaire without a funeral was discovering that immortality had its paperwork. You know, I said, reaching for a fresh stack of invoices, if he'd left your orchids alone, he might have stayed a ghost. Wolf closed his eyes. Archie, he murmured, never disturb a man's orchids unless you are prepared to be pruned. 3 days later, just when the brownstone had resumed its customary rhythm, orchids at 9, beer at 11, lunch at 1, silence where appropriate, the telephone rang with the crisp insistence of unfinished business. I picked it up. Goodwin. Saul, came the reply. His voice carried that thin edge that meant developments. Tell me the ghost tripped over his own sheet, I said. Not quite, Saul said. French authorities detained a man in Marseille traveling under the name Laurent Rousseau. Fingerprints match Lysander Rook. I let out a breath. Efficient. He's claiming identity theft, Saul continued. Says he's a victim of financial manipulation. Blames Corda. Of course he does. There's more, Saul said. Before his arrest, he placed a call. To New York. To whom? I asked. A florist on Lexington. I blinked. That's new. He ordered a delivery, Saul said. To be sent this morning, I turned slowly toward the office doorway, half expecting to see a wreath hovering in the air. Address? I asked. Saul recited it. That's us, I said. I thought so, Saul replied. I hung up and walked back into the office. Wolf was in his chair, eyes half closed, the posture of a man who already knows the shape of an answer. Rook has been detained, I said. He placed one last order before the curtain fell. Wolf's eyes opened fully. What order? A floral delivery. To this house, Wolf's expression did not change, but something in the room cooled. At what hour? He asked. This morning? As if on cue, the doorbell rang. I went to answer it. On the stoop stood a delivery boy holding a large white box tied with green ribbon. The scent reached me before the card did. Orchids, unmistakable. Delivery for Mr. Nero Wolfe, the boy said. I signed and carried it inside. In the office, I set the box on my desk and untied the ribbon. Inside, arranged with meticulous care, was a cascade of Paphiopedilum rothschildianum. Perfect, untouched, magnificent. Wolf's gaze fixed on them. There's a card, I said, opening the envelope. I read aloud, even ghosts appreciate beauty. My compliments on your garden. LR silence followed. I looked at Wolf. He couldn't resist. No, Wolf said quietly. He could not. He rose, an event significant enough to merit notation, and crossed to the desk. He regarded the orchids not with pleasure, but with appraisal. Remove them, he said. I stared. They're exceptional. They are contamination, Wolf said. I hesitated only a moment before lifting the arrangement and carrying it toward the hall. Theodore appeared as if summoned by botanical instinct. Archie, he asked, eyes widening at the sight. Uninvited, I said. His expression hardened. They do not belong here. Precisely, Wolfie said from behind me. Theodore took the box with reverent severity and disappeared upstairs, no doubt to quarantine the intruders like diseased specimens. When I returned, Wolfie had resumed his chair. He wanted the final word, I said. Yes. To prove he was still directing the narrative, Wolfie inclined his head slightly. He mistakes gesture for dominance. I leaned against my desk. He's in custody. The foundation's stabilized. Corda's cooperating. Seems like the narrative's out of his hands. For the moment, Wolf said. But men of his temperament rarely accept confinement gracefully. You think he'll try again? I think, Wolf replied, that he has already attempted his last move. The flowers? Yes, I considered that. A bow at the end of the performance. An assertion, Wolf corrected. That even in exposure he retains elegance, I snorted softly. There's elegance, and then there's ordering orchids from jail. Wolf's lips twitched faintly. A few minutes later, Saul arrived in person, briefcase in hand. French authorities confirmed, he said. Extradition proceedings will begin once financial charges are formalized here. Will he contest? I asked. Vigorously, Saul said. He's claiming the death was a symbolic withdrawal from public life. Symbolic cremation, I said. Saul allowed himself the ghost of a smile. Something like that. Wolf folded his hands. He sought to control perception. Instead, he exposed character. Saul nodded once. Corda's statement details the planning. The hospital arrangement, the body substitution, the transfers. It's thorough, because he has been relieved of illusion, Wolf said. Saul glanced toward the stairs. Theodore was offended. He will recover, Wolf said. Orchids are resilient. And men? I asked. Wolf's gaze settled on me, steady and reflective. Men, he said, are less so. After Saul left, the house resumed its equilibrium once more. Theodore later reported that the delivered orchids had been disassembled and examined. They were authentic, untainted, and ultimately donated to a conservatory that would appreciate them without symbolism. That evening, as Fritz set down a plate of veal and mushrooms, I studied Wolf across the table. You know, I said, for a ghost, he made a lot of noise. Wolf lifted his fork with deliberate care. Archie, he said, the truly powerful require no theatrics, and the ones who think they are powerful, they haunt themselves, Wolf replied. I considered Lysander Rook, alive, detained, stripped of his illusion of immortality, and the two missing petals that had started it all. Next time someone wants your attention, I said, maybe they'll send a postcard. Wolf cut his veal with surgical precision. If they value discretion, he said, they will send nothing at all. The brownstone settled into its accustomed silence, the orchids secure upstairs, the ghost reduced to a name in a dossier. And for the first time in weeks, there were no petals out of place. The following week brought rain, which suited the city, and, in a quieter way, suited Wolfie. Rain presses the world closer to the windows and discourages unnecessary visitation. The brownstone, having endured its haunting, seemed content to breathe again. The official confirmation arrived on a grey Tuesday morning. Lysander Rook had waived his preliminary objections and agreed to extradition. The French authorities, unimpressed by symbolic death, had found the financial trail persuasive. His accounts were frozen. His passport revoked. His reinvention concluded. I read the wire aloud while Wolf sat with his eyes closed, fingertips together. So the ghost is booking passage home, I said. In custody. Yes, Wolf murmured. Corda's testimony sealed it, I added. Full disclosure. Dates, transfers, the hospital arrangement. Even the florist. Wolf opened his eyes. Conscience, he said, is frequently awakened by fear, or by realizing your boss considers you expendable, I said. That as well. Lenore Voss arrived shortly after noon, umbrella folded with the neat precision that characterized her entire existence. She looked tired, but no longer strained. There is a difference between tension and resolution. She carried the latter. It's over, she said, without preamble. For Mr. Rook's present ambitions, Wolf corrected gently. She allowed herself a faint smile. The board has voted to restructure the foundation entirely. Greater oversight. Independent audits. Transparency. A sensible correction, Wolfe said. She studied him a moment. He truly believed he could step outside consequence. Many men of means do, Wolfe replied. They confuse influence with immunity. And yet, she said softly, it was a detail, a scar that did not exist, that undid him. Wolf inclined his head. Arrogance produces excess detail. The liar who adds flourish supplies the rope. She nodded slowly. I keep thinking of the hospital. How easily it was arranged. Institutions are designed for efficiency, Wolf said. Efficiency can be misdirected. And you, she said, turning slightly toward me, counted petals. I count a lot of things, I said. It's a hobby. She extended her hand, first to me, then to Wolf. You've preserved more than money. When she had gone, the house resumed its muted quiet. Fritz clattered in the kitchen. Theodore moved above like a careful breeze among leaves. I leaned back in my chair. You know what still bothers me? Wolf lifted an eyebrow. He didn't need the theatrics, I said. He could have siphoned funds quietly for years. But he wanted applause. Yes, Wolf said. He required witness, from you, from anyone, Wolf corrected. But particularly from those he deemed formidable, so the Orchid room was a dare. It was an invitation, Wolf said. A challenge. See if you can detect me. And you did. Eventually. I studied him. You're not satisfied. Wolf's lips compressed slightly. Satisfaction is a vulgar goal. Completion is preferable, and this is complete? For now. The telephone rang. I answered, listened, then covered the receiver. Inspector Kramer, I said. He sounds almost cheerful, Wolf sighed. Put him through. Kramer's voice filled the room in blunt bursts. Extradition confirmed. Federal charges pending. Corda cooperating. He allowed himself one grudging acknowledgement. Your fat genius earned his keep, Kramer said. Wolf's expression did not change. Good day, Inspector. When I replaced the receiver, I grinned. High praise. Grudging competence is still competence, Wolfie said. The rain intensified, tapping insistently against the windows. I rose and moved to the front, watching the street blur. You ever think, I said, that men like Rook are less afraid of prison than of obscurity? Yes, Wolf said without hesitation. And which did he earn? Wolf regarded me steadily. Both. There was a pause, companionable and complete. Theodore descended briefly to report that the Rothschildianums were thriving, no further petals missing, no intrusions. The sanctity of the Orchid room restored not by locks but by vigilance. After he retreated upstairs, I turned back to Wolf. It started with a petal, I said. 2, technically. It started, Wolf corrected. With vanity, I nodded. He believed death was negotiable. He believed identity was transferable, Wolf said. That by altering paperwork, he could alter reality. And all it took to collapse the illusion, I said, was asking which wrist. Wolf's eyes held a faint glimmer of approval. Truth resides in particulars, Archie. The grand deception often fails on the smallest hinge. Fritz appeared in the doorway. Lunch is ready. Wolf rose with deliberate dignity, the matter concluded in his mind as cleanly as a ledger balanced. As we moved toward the dining room, I glanced once toward the stairs that led to the Orchid room. For a week it had been a stage. Now it was simply what it had always been. Wolf's sanctuary. You know, I said, most ghosts rattle chains. Yes, Wolf replied. This one rattled orchids. Wolf paused at the threshold, his bulk casting a steady outline against the dining room light. Archie, he said, when a man must counterfeit his own death to feel powerful, he has already forfeited substance. And what has he gained? I asked. Wolfer considered that for half a second. A cautionary footnote, he said. We took our seats. Outside, the rain continued, washing the city clean of spectacle. Upstairs, the orchids remained undisturbed, and the only ghost left in the brownstone was the memory of a man who had mistaken performance for permanence, and learned, too late, the difference.